Hey guys, it's Shara from Woodshop Diaries, and in this video, we're going to rebuild a table that I built 7 years ago. Now, I know some of you might be thinking that we're rebuilding it because it fell apart, but that's actually not the case. Unfortunately, it's because of a house fire. I made the original 8-foot long table for a friend when she got married. Long story short, last year they suffered a house fire, and thankfully they didn't lose everything, but they ended up having to rebuild a significant portion of their home. And in the process of rebuilding, their dining room ended up being a lot smaller than it had been originally, so this huge table no longer fit. The table was a little damaged, but still salvageable, so she asked if I could just trim it down a little so that it would fit her new space. Since I built the original table before I started making videos, I thought this would be a good opportunity to share how simple it is to build a very basic dining table, but also share the story behind this particular build. This video was sponsored by my friends at Shopify. First, let's take a look at what we've got. You'll notice this table has no top. I made the original tabletop out of construction 2x12 pine boards, and it's still structurally sound, but because of the soot and some of the damage from like the smoke and stuff, it needed to be refinished. Personally, I would rather just build a brand new top than to have to sand all of that down and refinish it. So when I went to her house to pick it up, to make it easier to load and unload out of the truck, I just removed the top and left it there. I attached the original tabletop here to this base with pocket hole screws. You can actually still see the pocket holes in the apron. This is, according to the experts, not the correct way to attach a tabletop because it doesn't allow for wood movement. If you're curious about what happened by attaching it the wrong way, a few months after building it, it did develop a small crack on one end of the table. So to fix it, I literally unscrewed it from the apron, just like tried to get as much glue into the crack as I possibly could, reclamped it, and then once it was dry, screwed it back in through the same pocket holes. And it's held up since then just fine. I have since learned that that was the wrong way of attaching a tabletop, but honestly, so was the way that I fixed it, and it still worked fine until the fire. Anyway, we'll be attaching the new top differently, so we'll see what happens. Now you'll notice one of these legs, this one right back here, has some damage. It feels rotten, like it's had water damage, which is odd because all of the other legs, besides being filthy, seem fine. It doesn't really matter how it got damaged. I've ordered a replacement leg because it will need to be replaced, but thankfully the other 3 legs and the aprons will be able to reuse. They just need to be cleaned up a little. I assembled the table base with pocket holes and screws, and it's held up great over the years. So that's how I'll be reassembling it. But first, let's take it apart and get everything sanded down. When I'm building large tables, I actually like to glue up the top first, then build the base to fit. So for now, I set these pieces to the side and I'll come back to them a little later. For the new top, we decided to build it from red oak versus pine. I ordered some red oak lumber, 2x thick, for this tabletop, and I had them surface 2 sides and then square 1 edge. So I'm gonna have to rip the other edge that's not squared on my table saw to get a nice straight line to glue up. Pine would have been about 1/10 of the price of the red oak, and it would have worked just fine. We just decided on a hardwood option the second time around because it's less likely to dent and scratch from the daily wear and tear of my friend's 3 little boys. After squaring the edges on the table saw, I started gluing up the top, but I only glued 1 board at a time. I found, especially with large pieces, it just makes glue ups a lot less stressful to only deal with 1 glue joint at a time. I let each piece dry at least a few hours before adding another, and then I just did my best to kind of keep everything as flat and as flush as possible. I let the final glue up cure overnight, then I moved the top to the workbench to start sanding. I sanded the tabletop, both the top and bottom sides, with 80 grit sandpaper to remove all of the glue residue and to flatten it out as best that I could. This is a good time to put on your headphones and zone out to some good music. After everything was sanded down flat, before final sanding, I filled some of the knots and cracks with a general purpose epoxy. And after that was cured, I sanded it down smooth and worked my way all over the entire table with 120, then 180, then 220 grit sandpaper. In the last 7 years since building the original table, a lot of things have changed. But one of the biggest changes in my business over the years came after learning about Shopify. When I first started sharing projects like these, I would share the photos and written tutorial instructions on my website like this. And while that was helpful, I knew that I could better serve my audience and grow my business with more detailed videos and printable building plans. And that's where Shopify came in. Shopify is the commerce platform that I and millions of other businesses all over the world chose to set up my storefront. Two of the main reasons that I chose Shopify is that it's so easy to create and customize your own storefront using the drag and drop editor. So no fancy coding or technical skills required. The second thing is that it integrates with the platforms I was already established on, like Facebook, Pinterest, and YouTube. That makes it easy for me to share, but also easy for you to find the products and resources that you're looking for. And just in case you're wondering, Shopify is great for both physical and digital products, so it supports businesses of all kinds. If you're thinking about starting or growing your own business, start a free trial of Shopify today at shopify.com/woodshopdiaries or scan the QR code. After sanding everything down to 220 grit, I went ahead and stained the top. Then I applied 4 coats of Minwax polyacrylic, just sanding lightly between each coat. I feel like the sanding here never ends. After the top side had cured a day or two, I flipped it over and sealed the bottom as well. And at that point, I could build the table base, which thankfully went a lot quicker than the top. The table base starts with 4 legs and 4 pieces that connect them all together. These are called the apron. The table needs 2 short and 2 long apron pieces, and the way to figure the length is to simply measure the final size of your tabletop, determine how much overhang you want, then subtract that and the width of your table legs, and that'll give you the length that you need to cut your aprons. These are just 2x6 construction pine boards. What I did when I originally made this table is I cut a small dado about 1 inch from the bottom edge of the apron. This is just a decorative element. You can add this, you can not add this. I just ran it through the table saw with a blade about 1/4 inch high and then ran it through again, just 1 blade width over. So I basically cut a 2 blade width dado 1/4 inch deep. It just gives this little extra dimension piece at the bottom of the apron. I am going to assemble the table using pocket holes and screws, but I'm not going to reuse the same pocket holes that I already had. I'm going to drill holes with the Craig XL. So this jig is designed to drill some larger pocket holes that you can use these XL screws with. It just holds a little bit stronger, and going into these really thick legs, I think this might be a better option than the standard screws, but if you don't have the XL jig, the standard screws work fine. That's what I used previously. I'm just gonna go a little bit bigger this time. So this jig has settings for 1.5 inch thick, which is what we're working with here, and 3.5 inch thick, so you can use it with 4x4s. But I'm just gonna adjust this to 1.5 and drill the pocket holes. And I'll just drill them like next to the old ones. I assembled the table base using pocket holes and screws, and I just used a scrap piece of 2x6 to help me position them about 1.5 inches inset from the outside edge of the leg. An extra set of hands is kind of helpful with this part since these pieces are kind of long. And once the 4 aprons were on, I added some 2x4 supports to run between them. These pieces just kind of help stabilize the large frame, but will also be used for attaching the top later. The next morning, I carried the table outside to prime and paint, and I attempted to spray it, but it was a lot windier than I had planned, so after spraying the primer, I brought it inside to paint it the old-fashioned way. Honestly, I think brushing and rolling was easier than spraying anyway. Between coats, I added some 2x4 corner supports. I cut these with 45-degree mitered ends and marked where to notch them out to fit around the legs. Now, I could have just made these a little longer so that they didn't need to be notched, but I kind of liked how the notch just helped hold the leg tight. I installed these using a couple of pocket holes, and then I added a screw onto each end. So there are different ways to attach the tabletop to allow for wood movement. They make these brackets, the Z-clips, they make figure 8 fasteners. There's a lot of like bracket hardware options, but an easy way that I can just use the framing that I already have here and not have to buy anything extra is to drill some oversized holes in these braces and the corner braces. So I've got a 3/8 inch drill bit installed in my drill. I'm gonna actually drill like 2 holes next to each other and make like a little slot. It doesn't matter specifically where I place this. I'm just gonna put kind of one towards this end and one towards that end, and then one in each corner. That way I can attach the table at each corner and then just a few times in the middle. All right, so I've got a slot drilled here, and a slot on the other side, and I've got one here, 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 and here. Once the top was placed on the base, I used some screws with washers through these holes to secure them together. I tightened so that they were snug, but still loose enough to be able to move as needed. And with that, this table is ready to go back to its new home and be used and enjoyed for many more years. I really hate the circumstances for this rebuild, but I am glad that I got to revisit the project, share it with you all, and give it a bit of an upgrade in the process. I hope you enjoyed watching it come together, and if you'd like to build your own, I've got the printable plans with tips on how to customize it to any size you need in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, friends, and until next time, happy building!